Hello, everyone. I would like to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the projects, the commissioned projects, because Lawrence Abu Hamdan and Nida Ghous and Umar Shankar Mantrabadi are doing an audio essay on Friday at 4. And it's part of the commissioned program, which encompasses 5 commissioned artworks. One is by Jumana Emil Aboud, which is in hall number 2 in the art fair. Another is by Maria Teresa Alves in Al Cercal Avenue, and Mehrin Murtaza as well, and in the new expansion, so I invite you to go see them. And there are also inside the fair, there's a commission by Farry Bradley and Chris Weaver as well, which is also on sound and sound of architecture. But I would like to take the opportunity to really invite you to the Friday audio essay, because Nida, Uma Shankar and Lawrence, who go by the collective name Uma Shankar and the Archaeologists, will be launching a 2-year project called Unsound Evidence. And it's a sort of mission of acoustic archaeology, because Uma Shankar has been developing this recording devices and microphones to measure and sort of give sound as evidence at archaeological sites in India for the past few years. Nida Ghous has been doing research on sound in India, as well as sound in experimental film in India. And Lawrence Abu Hamdan, of course, has been working on the politics of sound for this is his practice, basically. So they're going to, the performance will be here Friday at 4, so this is to invite you. I will now introduce Lawrence briefly. So this is his bio, basically, from his website. I've been very lazy. So Lawrence Abu Hamdan's work frequently deals with the relationship between listening and politics, borders, human rights, testimony, and truth through the production of documentaries, essays, audiovisual installations, video works, graphic design, sculpture, photography, workshops, and performance. Abu Hamdan's interest with sound and its intersection with politics originate from his background in DIY music, because he was part of a band, the Chicago Boys. لا ولا شو اسمه ايش اسمه like others. Okay, I don't know even how to say that. It's okay, so he was just now in the at the Armory show. He's the commissioned artist, and I think he did a project on potato chips and how they work as spy gadgets, because there's research. They've been doing research at MIT on how to spy on people using potato chips bags, which is really interesting. I think so. Huh? Okay. So, يلا دقيقة. One more paragraph. One paragraph. خلاص. And then I let you. Okay, so in 2013, Abu Hamdan's audio documentary, The Freedom of Speech Itself, was submitted as evidence at the UK Asylum Tribunal, where the artist himself was called to testify as an expert witness. He continues to make sonic analysis for legal investigation and advocacy. مزبوط? Most recently, for Defense for Children International. The artist's forensic audio investigations are conducted as part of his research for forensic architecture at Goldsmith College, London, where he is also a PhD candidate and associate lecturer. Okay. And now I invite Lawrence.
Thank you, Lara, for the invitation, especially, and thank you very much to Shuman and Sultan for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure to be here and talking to you. So I'm just going to go straight into it.
Shopping facilities in the city centre and the local region are second to none. All the major high street names are represented on Northumberland Street and in Eldon Square shopping centre. In addition to large department stores, there are designer outlets and smaller specialist shops, not to mention market and street stalls. The nearby Gateshead Metro Centre is Europe's biggest shopping and leisure complex and attracts shoppers from all over the region and beyond.
Shopping facilities in the city centre and the local region are second to none. All the major high street names are represented on Northumberland Street and at Eldon Square shopping centre
and attracts shoppers from all over the region and beyond.
Shopping facilities in the city centre and the local region are second to none. All the major high street names are represented on Northumberland Street and at Eldon Square shopping centre. In addition to large department stores, there are designer outlets and smaller specialist shops, not to mention markets and street stalls.
All the major high street names are represented
what we're
on
listening to now
Northumberland
is
Street and in Eldon Square shopping
a
centre.
voice lineup.
In addition to large
Like
department stores, there
you
are
would see
designer
the
outlets
series
and
of
smaller
mugshots
specialist
that
shops,
people
not
hold
to
up their
mention
numbers
markets and
for
street
in a
stalls.
police
The nearby Gateshead
photographic
Metro
lineup.
Centre
This is the
is
vocal
Europe's
equivalent.
biggest shopping and
It's a
leisure
series of
complex
people
and
reading the
attracts
same
shoppers from all
statement
over the region and beyond.
from some kind of shopping center.
Shopping facilities in the city centre and local region.
This
are
actually
second to none.
recording was
All major high street
pre-1984
names
because
are
they don't do
represented
this
on Northumberland
anymore.
Street and in Eldon Square
Why they
shopping
don't
centre.
do this
In addition to
voice
large
lineups
department
is because
stores,
of
there
a
are designer
very
outlets
particular
and smaller
policy
specialist
that was
shops,
put in
not to
place
mention markets and street
across
stalls. Nearby Gateshead Metro
the
Centre is
world
Europe's
actually,
biggest shopping centre and
but
leisure
originated in
and
England in
attracts shoppers
1984,
from all
which
over the
was
region and beyond.
that all police interviews, rather than being written down, actually became to be recorded, audio recorded. So what you had was a shift from writing down a testimony and somebody looking at it and writing whether or not it was what they said or what they didn't say, to actually recording all the voices of people who came in. And this was in an effort to make the whole police interview situation much more transparent. Of course, then you had exactly what you said recorded down. But another thing was a kind of remnant of this policy, which was actually that the police had the voice, the entire voice, not just the words you said, but actually the kind of sonic quality of the voice itself. And this ended up, a byproduct of this meant that linguists in universities and in many other places, phoneticians working in different departments across the world, started to be asked by the police forces to identify the voices on those recordings, to tell which regional accent they had, to see if they could profile those voices and match them to recordings they'd had, maybe making illicit conversations over the telephone or these other kinds of things. So very quickly what you had is the biggest archive of voices growing, bigger than any other archive of voices had before, growing very fast. And you had it basically of all the regional accents and every kind of thing. It became a massive resource that became used by the police departments to analyze voices. And also what this meant was that it began a new field, a new scientific field, which is called forensic linguistics. And forensic linguistics is born out of this moment, whereas a forensic phonetician who I am very inspired by, in fact, told me that up until that point he'd done maybe 1 or 2 cases, and after 1984 it was as though there had been a thunderstorm and it started raining cassette tapes, because of course they still record it on cassette to this day. So this forensic linguistics has been ongoing ever since and has actually been gaining in momentum. Now it's at its largest ever application in 2 different fronts. I'm going to talk about the 2 different ways in which forensic linguistics is applied today. One of them is a practice of people actually listening. The other one is now kind of the more machine listening and programming of algorithms. So the first one, it's actually part of a work I did. Lara mentioned it. It's called The Freedom of Speech Itself. And what's been happening since 2001 actually is that forensic linguistics has been used in defense of the national borders in many of Northern European countries. Because what has been going on is when asylum seekers, undocumented migrants, come to the UK or come to Germany or Holland or wherever they might end up, they're subject to an accent test to see if their accent is the same as the place to which they claim to come from. Now, if that doesn't already sound sort of pretty draconian enough, For me, I guess my interest in this, more than the forensic linguistic side of that, was this idea that you take something like the voice, which is extremely slippery, right? It's a thing full of mimicry. It's something in which your interlocutor constantly affects the way you speak. You speak according to that thing. It's something of a kind of process of constant self-reinvention, and it's something very kind of cultural. It's not as bureaucratic as something like a passport or a birth certificate. So there has to be a kind of violent synchronization to bring something like the voice and treat it as if it's a passport. Nevertheless, it's been done for the last 10 or 14 years to a great effect, and has actually ended up causing the wrongful deportation of thousands of refugees who actually had legitimate claims for asylum. So, I heard many stories while I was making this research, and one of them was a guy from Sierra Leone who actually, when he was tested 5 years after he'd been living in the UK, was told that his English was too good and that he must be coming from Nigeria rather than Sierra Leone. And it wasn't creolized enough. It wasn't authentic enough as a kind of Creole voice. So the other story I had, which is the main story of the documentary, is the story of a guy called Muhammad who's from Palestine, but because of a test they did after they had misplaced his passport, they lost his ID card. They told him that he was, based on 3 words in his test, that he was either Syrian or Libyan. And many of you know in this room that being from either Syria or Libya is a massive stretch one can make with their voice. So the Syrian vowel that they found in his speech, in this tape recording that they elicited of his voice, was in fact no less than in the word for tomato. So rather than saying bandora, the Palestinian way of saying it, he said banadura, which of course we know as the Syrian way of saying it. So this sound became very significant in his process, in his making him rejected asylum seeker and living in that context. So this sound in middle of bandura. So this syllable is the sound that provides the UK border agency with the apparent certainty of Muhammad's Syrian origin. The border agency designates this syllable as a Syrian national, and it implies that this vowel used in the word for tomato is coterminous with Syria's borders. But locating this Syrian vowel in the speech of a Palestinian surely proves nothing more than the displacement of the Palestinians themselves. In other words, the instability of an accent, its borrowed and hybridized phonetic form, is testament not to someone's origins, but only to an unstable and migratory lifestyle, which is of course common in those fleeing from conflict and seeking asylum, often spending years getting to the target country, living in diversely populated refugee camps. Is it not more likely then that a genuine asylum seeker's accent would be an irregular and itinerant concoction of voices, a biography of a journey rather than an immediately distinguishable sound, a pure voice that avows its unshakable roots to a single place? The fact that this syllable designates citizenship above an identity card that contradicts it forces us to rethink how borders are being made perceptible, and how configurations of vowels and consonants are made legally accountable. So what is the legal status of our voices? What is the connection of our accent to our citizenship? And is there any law that stipulates how our voices should conform with our national borders? Can this phoneme renounce its Syrian citizenship?
You know what this reminds me of, actually? It reminds me of. I'm not. I mean, I heard this because I wasn't in Lebanon during the Civil War, but I heard stories that the Christian militia, you know, the right wing, what do they call the phalangists, the Kataib, right? They used to have these checkpoints, and so when a car would stop, they would stop a car, and they would walk up to the driver and open the window and stick a tomato in his face, right? or a tomato. And said there would be like, what's this? Now, if the guy said banadura, let's translate that to tomato, they would let him pass because that was the Lebanese way of saying it, right? If he said bandora, or tomato, that would be the Palestinian way of saying it. So they would ask him to step out, and now no one knows what happened to these guys who were asked to step out, but you can, I'm sure, use your imagination. They were never found,
So where are you from, Mahdi?
What do you mean? I'm from Hackney.
Hackney, but you're Danish, right?
No, I'm Palestinian. Well, I grew up in Denmark.
So from where in Palestine are you from?
I'm not from Palestine.
So where are you from?
We're Palestinians from a refugee camp in Lebanon, Ain al-Hilwi.
So you were born in Lebanon?
No, I was born in Dubai.
Oh, okay. So how come you have an American accent?
What do you mean?
You have this American twang to your English.
I just, Eddie Murphy and Stallone and all these guys,
So it's from Hollywood then?
No, I'm from Hackney.
So in attempting to establish a correlation between voice and citizenship, we encounter another vocal legal paradox. In criminal charges against a citizen of the United Kingdom, the criminal is afforded the right to protection from self-incrimination, which is commonly known as the right to silence, or in the United States, the Miranda rights. This is a fundamental legal right not to speak if you feel that your speech would in some way incriminate you. However, with speech profiling becoming more and more an increasingly widespread form of investigation, it is not only our words that can incriminate us, but the phonological content of our voices as well. Therefore, just as our speech is being mutated by the legal system, we must ourselves fight to rephrase the legal diction so that it remains transparent about the ways in which our voices are placed under custody and investigated. My proposal for altering the way the Lord speaks to us entails at the moment one's arrest happens, actually. And therefore, it means amending the right to silence. In the United Kingdom, the revised version might read like this: you do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention now, when questioned, something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say, including the way you say it, may be given in evidence against you. Yet even if these alterations to the right to silence were to be made, we would still need to understand that this fundamental legal right is only afforded to the citizen. The asylum seeker, for example, has no recourse to silence. The burden of proof lies not with the prosecutor in such cases, but with the claimant themselves. In other words, if they don't speak, they will be deported. Without the right to silence, the asylum seeker is forced to speak to the law. They must make themselves audible to the system and yet remain without control over the conditions over which they are being heard. And this actually is a project which I'm not sure actually I have time to go into, but it's a silent work of mine, a graphic work, and it very much explores this a kind of attempt to give back a kind of right to silence within of this context by doing a series of alternative maps, working with 9 Somali asylum seekers who were all rejected from the Netherlands. So what asylum seeker does retain in these contexts, if not the right to silence, is the right to the freedom of expression and freedom of speech. And this doubling or self-betrayal of the voice forces to redefine our freedom of speech to a concept that must now be extended to not only encompass the words we speak, but the sonic quality of our speech itself. The voice has long been understood as the very means by which we can secure and advocate one's political and legal interests. But these recent shifts in the law's listening affirm that the stakes and conditions of speech have altered in a non-transparent way. The shift is seemingly minute, as we see in the voice analysis of asylum seekers, yet it can have a dramatic impact on people's lives. Therefore, the more radical the practice of listening at the core of legal investigations become, the more they herald an advent, the moment to reshape and redefine the political conventions of speech and sound in society. Now it seems that the battle for free speech is no longer about fighting to speak freely, but fighting for the control over the conditions of which we are being heard. And this continues in another way in the second part of this talk, in the form of another piece of emerging technology that I wanted to share with you. Here it is.
Year's anthrax attacks. These allegations were Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. 2 weeks ago, I reluctantly appeared before the TV cameras to defend myself against the bizarre allegations that were appearing about me in the news media dealing with last year's anthrax attacks. These allegations were fueled by ongoing leaks from the Justice Department, and those leaks continue to this day.
This is LVA 6.50, Layered Voice Analysis 6.50, and it's a new type of lie detector that is being used in Russia, in the LAPD are using it all over the world. They're using this thing. It's an Israeli company called Neme Cisco who made it. And what it does is it uses the micro fluctuations of the vocal cords to be able to determine whether or not somebody is lying or not. This is what it says. Of course, there's a whole other series of verdicts, like the distinction between a false and an inaccuracy, which I would find difficult to describe, let alone hear in the micro fluctuations of someone's vocal cords. But nevertheless, this machine is much smarter than me. So, basically, it's being sold all around the world because, unlike a polygraph, where in which someone needs to be connected to the thing, this only needs a voice. So there's a kind of idea that you expel the thing that can betray you, and is also something that can happen over the telephone, and so it increases the kind of distance over which this thing works. In fact, the thing is totally bogus, and it's quite culturally specific. So here you're seeing the American version of the software. In Britain it says either high risk or low risk, but it's exactly the same thing that's going on. They just know that Brits are too skeptical about these kind of things. So basically it's totally bogus, and the way I know that is because of a group of amazing linguists who were in Stockholm, and what they did was they actually reverse engineered the software. When the company from Israel came to sell this thing to the government, one of the linguists took the software, the patent, and said it looks interesting, and he reverse engineered it. And from that he used the software, and he took it very much on its face value when it says it only needs a voice. It doesn't matter what language you speak, it's just the voice itself. They took that very seriously, and in fact just tested with this reverse engineered algorithm vowel sounds. And this is one of the results of this. So I'm going to play you, ladies and gentlemen, the truth. This is the truth. They realized that it had basically to do with the way that you held a tone, essentially, so it functions very much like a kind of horoscope, actually, a kind of prophecy, where in which the things that it gives you one good answer, one bad answer, and something in the middle, but it's interesting in many respects, because of course it doesn't really matter if it works or not. It works to shut people up, and especially in the context of the UK, it's used in the benefit system. If someone's calling to get disability benefits from the government, they use the software on their voice. It has an amazing connection to the stethoscope, and that's because essentially when the stethoscope was first introduced in medical history in 1816, what they did with it was it came at a moment where doctors were getting increasingly frustrated with patients' self-testimony, and patients felt pain where there was none. They felt a other kinds of things when other things were going on. They exaggerated. And so when the stethoscope emerged, it allowed doctors to listen to the body itself and to grow a lexicon from the body, which meant that what they felt was that sounds from stomachs and hearts and lungs were sounds which didn't lie, right? Sounds which only told the truth. And here is the same thing, but it happens within of the voice itself, the body in the voice and the words in the voice. And so the one big difference with stethoscopic listening, of course, is that it actually emerges and it produces a greater ability for people to listen. It increases people's auditory awareness, whereas this actually kind of basically stops people listening altogether. They just start looking at this screen, and it doesn't really matter what the person is saying in front of them. So one of them is a kind of thing that they have the similar kind of truth forms of truth production, but one of them itself is a kind of lie. LVA 6.50 amplifies the dark phrenology of the voice, which is operative today. Regardless of whether they scientifically work or not, pieces of software which use the voice as a biometric tool deeply confuse its role as a conduit for language and negotiation. Simply by virtue of the fact that insurance companies, government councils, and police departments use these forms of listening offered by LVA 6.50, the software is weaponized, regardless of its credibility amongst the scientific community. In the sites where speech acts, it is our speech which is under attack. Assuming an increasing proliferation of these emergent and mutated strands of listening forces us to ask more general questions about the role of the voice as a central means to testify and to give account of ourselves. Will it still be a fair hearing if nobody is listening? Thank you.